Parshas Vaeira. Today's Torah study is actually sponsored. Today's Torah study is sponsored by Stephanie and Jay Marmer in loving memory of Stephanie's brother Bert Stollerman, Doiv Ber Avraham ben Hershleib, on the occasion of his yortzeit today. May his soul be elevated in heaven in the merit of the Torah study that we study. He no longer is able to achieve merits on his own as he is in the heavenly world, but we can credit to his account our Torah study. So that's what's happening here today. Thank you, Stephanie and Jay. We're going to learn today the portion VAEI'RA, which is on page 351. Really very fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Even though so today's Torah portion really goes into the plagues. Last week we were introduced to Moses at the burning bush. He gets appointed, and he speaks to Pharaoh, demands to let my people go that they may serve me. And what does Pharaoh do? Pharaoh doubles down. That's the portion, right? Pharaoh doubles down on the work. He figures that they've got too much free time to think for themselves. So the decree that happened at the end of the last Torah portion was that Pharaoh says, listen, you obviously have too much free time in your hands. So instead of us providing you with bricks, which you will build, we will now make, you got to find and make your own straw. We'll get your own straw, basically, which obviously was a huge addition to the work. And they were just, back-breaking labor on top of back-breaking labor. So at the end of the portion, we're faced with, I just want to turn to the very end of the last Torah portion, which is page 347. Let's go to the Maftir, verse 22. Moses returns to God and he said, "Oh God," it's the very end of the previous portion, "why have you mistreated this people? Things have gotten so bad that the Egyptians are immuring the Israelites' children in the walls of the buildings when they do not meet their daily quota of bricks." This is horrible. It's a Holocaust. They were literally, they were saying that if you don't reach your quota, we will finish the quota with your own children, God forbid. "And why have you sent me?" Like, well, why? Why the suffering? "For ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has made things worse for this people. And still you have not delivered your people." This is Moses crying out, "Where are you, God? Where was God in the Holocaust? How could you have allowed this to happen? How can you continue to allow this to happen?" Moses is deeply, deeply pained with what's happening over here.
Moses says "this people" rather than "my people." Just the term just strikes me.
This people.
This people.
This people. Okay. Yep. This people. Okay. Interesting. I didn't think of that.
Consider himself part of that.
And the Medrash says that it was so bad that they were immuring the Israelites' children in the walls of the building.
Yeah, we just said that.
Yeah.
So Rashi says that if you, in case you're wondering why I care, Moses is saying, this people is the people that you appointed me to lead. That's why. This is the people that you sent me for. That's why. Maybe that's the answer to your question. So how's God going to respond to this answer? What's amazing also is that we don't get an answer in the end of last week's Torah portion. We finish the Parsha and we go to Kiddush at the end of the cliffhanger. And maybe right there is a lesson already. Well, let's just see the end of the Parsha. God said to Moses, "Are you questioning my justice?" I'm only going to read the bold now. God said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh, that because of the strong hand he will send them forth and he will forcibly drive them out of this land." So basically God says, don't worry about it, it's going to be good in the future. That's his answer. Let's just do it with the Medrash. "Are you questioning my justice? The children who are being immured are only those who have become consummately wicked, who would have become consummately wicked had they lived. And in this way I'm purifying the people of their immoral elements and saving these children from future punishment." Isn't that amazing? God says, listen, the kids that are being put in the walls, those are the most evil, those are the little Hitlers that are being put in the walls, right? Those are baby Hitlers. If you wish, you may test me in this. I will allow you to save one of them. Take him out of the wall, pick one, and you will see what will happen. Moses went and saved a child named Micha, who in fact later played a key role in the sin of the golden calf. Now, what did this guy Micha do? I just want to let you know what he did. This guy when they were crossing the Red Sea. Can you imagine crossing the Red Sea? Was that a miracle? He was the only Jew that was actually carrying an idol with him. Can you imagine? He was carrying an idol as the sea parts. It's not really, it's a high tide, it's a low tide. What?
It's a popular Israeli name.
Micha, yeah, very popular. But it's not even Micha. Micha's an angel. Micha's a different name.
Oh, okay.
So, but think about this a moment. I mean, how many people would you know can stare a miracle in the face and say, do you know anybody like that? I know plenty of people like that.
Every day is a miracle.
I know plenty of people like that can experience, like the good old joke about the guy who's looking for a parking spot in Manhattan, and he prays to God, I'll eat tefillin, I'll keep kosher, I'll do Shabbos, I'll do everything, you just give me this parking spot. And as the stretch limousine pulls out, right? What does he say? He says, never mind, God, I found it myself. Right? It's a joke, but it's so true. We are staring a miracle in the eye. Right? You look at a thing like the Gulf War. We all lived through that. The Gulf War. I mean, what were the odds? The site set in Israel. How is it that not a single Jew died from a Scud missile? That doesn't make any sense. He fired 39 of them on Israel. Right? And they're 2 stories tall, 40 feet. How does it? Israel's very good radar. Right? I don't know. They landed, for heaven's sake. Right? They had the Patriot missile. The answer is because we, like Micha, we're still struggling with this stuff. But it's just very interesting. We're already getting an answer about divine justice right now. And this comes obviously from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, where the answer is, Terry, we're reading from this Chumash. It's the Kahas Chumash, the blue one. The answer is that the people, look, according to this answer, and this is going to be very controversial. It's very controversial, this. But according to this answer is that the bad things that happen to people, you never know who these people were supposed to have been.
So are you saying that the 6 million who died
I'm not saying anything.
would have those who become
How would I know?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay. It's not like the world has become better.
This is
with
going-
this-
You draw your own conclusion. It's your Torah like it's my Torah.
It's so inconsistent.
No, but it's not like the ones who were
It's very
saved and their
consistent.
children became statistically any better. I mean,
Whose children? Which children?
if we look now.
No, we're the good guys. What it's insinuating
I'm a
is
child
that-
you know, of a survivor, and let's say
we're the righteous ones that made the cut. Right? Can you imagine?
Bernie
Can you-
Madoff,
yeah.
the righteous one
Can
was
you
the
imagine,
right.
Right. What the other guys would have been like?
Exactly.
Look, obviously,
Only God knows.
Rob, this is something which is like, at the edge of reason, the very far extreme edge of reason. It's impossible for us to understand this.
Don't even fast forward to the Holocaust. What about the Hebrews at that time who lived and then for 40 years kept questioning God and doing one thing after
So they
another
died off.
that was wrong, so God had to punish them. So they weren't that pure, the ones who
Uh, Why do you think that they were pure? What gave you that impression?
Well, look at all the things that happened. That they questioned. They were constantly questioning. How are we going to get food? How are we going to get water? Where is this? It's not like the ones who survived this, where we're suddenly so good.
Well, let me turn your attention to something else. I want you to turn your attention to Parshas B'Shalach. Please turn to page 399. Page 399.
Oh, we'll see, we're not updated.
399. Parshas B'Shalach. Yeah, that's why it's good to be in the same chumash. Because we jump around, if you may have noticed, right? Let's see what it says over here. Okay. Okay, so I want you to page 398, actually. Page 398. I'm going to do the Hebrew because the thing, it doesn't translate it properly here. Parshas B'Shalach goes like this. I'm just going to do the Hebrew. Vaehi b'shalach parei sa'am, and it was when Pharaoh sent the nation. V'lei nacham elikim derech eretz Plishtim. And Hashem didn't take them the shortcut route, Kikarivu, through the land of Plishtim. He didn't take them through Gaza. Ki amar elikim pen yinachim arm, because Hashem said maybe the people will have regret when they see a war, when they have to fight a war against the Philistines. V'shava Mitzrayim, and they'll want to come back home. They'll be weak of heart. So what did he do? Verse 18 says, so if therefore Hashem took them a roundabout route through the desert, through the sea of reeds, and armed, the Jewish people rose out of the land of Egypt. This word armed, chamushim, also means 1/5. 1/5. What does that mean, 1/5? That only 1/5 of the Jewish people emerged out of Egypt, because 80% of the Jewish people in Egypt never left Egypt. 4 out of 5 Jews died and were buried by their fellow Jews during the plague of darkness, so that the Egyptians wouldn't see. These were the Jews that said, Moses is a farce. We don't believe in the redemption. Not going to happen.
Yeah, but the 1/5 question, they got out of Egypt.
Those were the good guys.
When Moses went up on the mountain.
Those were the good guys.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that the other guys are like? Listen, they were after 210 years.
He was a saint in his own.
Rob, they were 210 years in slavery. These guys.
The point is
I want you to
the
think-
Holocaust.
I want you to realize what happened.
210 years,
4/5 were wiped
it
out.
changes their whole psyche.
And let me ask you another question to that, Marty. What happens after 2,000 years in exile? What happens to the Jew of Balen Isles after
Especially the-
2,000 years in
Oh my
exile?
God, those people
He's
are
so
bad.
lost his sense of direction. He doesn't know up from down, right from wrong, because he just completely lost his sense of direction. I mean, when you go scuba diving, they said you can get disoriented. So you got to blow bubbles so you can see where the bubbles go up. You'll know where's up instead of you going the wrong direction. So that's when you're underwater for 20 minutes, right? Can you imagine 2,000 years underwater? Right? What's going to happen? You're going to turn into a raisin, right? You don't know. You're not going to know what hit you, right? That's what's happening to the Jewish people. And just bear in mind, according to the Arizal, the generation that died in the desert, the 20% that did come out and that died in the desert and didn't make it into the promised land because they didn't want to come into the promised land, because they were addicted to welfare.
Right.
Yeah, I like the Daily Matter.
They were addicted to welfare. You politicized it. So they were addicted to welfare. They wanted free food, free healthcare, free college tuition,
And the freedom to whine and complain.
wine and dine, right? They got it all. They said, what? You want to take us into the promised land? You maybe gonna have to work over there? Sorry, not interested. Right. So the generation that died in the desert, that we'll learn about in subsequent weeks, was reincarnated in the generation, says the Arizal, that will welcome the Mashiach. The Rebbe says we are the generation that will welcome the Mashiach. Hence, we are they. 1, 2, and 2 equals 4, right? So connect the dots. Anyways, I just want to get back to that point of view, because this is so deep and so personal and so meaningful. So much to discuss of it. So the first thing I want to say is that, yes, it is outrageous what Hashem says here in the Gemara on page 347, that the ones that were stuck in the wall, immured in the wall, were destined to be sinners. Does that insinuate that the people that died in the Holocaust might have been destined to be evil? What do I know?
No, they don't know.
Can I say that? I can't say that. Hashem can say that, right? They were my people like they were your people. I'm not, right? So it just gives us a bit of an understanding of our lack of understanding. That's what it all does.
Well, the consistency which Rob pointed to is that God is the only entity that lives at the same time in the future. So we, limited people, can't question what might be in the future. God knows.
Right.
We
So the
don't.
only thing that is consistent here is that you know that you don't know. That's it. In other words, the premise of the question is false. Where was God in the Holocaust is more of a statement. It's more of a protest than it is a question.
Right.
Because if you're asking it as a question, then you clearly don't understand who you're talking to. Right? If you think that God is your friend or your neighbor, then you obviously don't get it. But when you understand that God is the one that is Havaya, past, present, and future, he's in the past, he's in the present, as he's in the future all at the same time, that he is infinite. When you realize that the question, Lama Hari Oisa La'am Hazeh, Moses is not really asking a question. He's protesting. Why have you been wicked? Why have you been, what's the word? Make things worse for this people. I also want to say that, I've said this before. It's an incredible interpretation of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya 42, where he says that the word emunah, faith, faith, is also means exercise or lifting weights, like practice. Emunah. Emunim means exercise. The army does emunim. They do exercise, right? They do training, right? So the word faith is also training. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that faith is not a destination. It means that it's a journey. It's a process. Like you never finish training and say, okay, I've finished my training. Now I can eat like a horse. It doesn't mean that. It means training. You always have to maintain your fitness. It's an aspiration you aspire towards. It's not a destination that you reach. So too, faith is something that you try to. It's a battle. That's what it means. It's a constant battle. It's a constant struggle, as opposed to something which is clear.
What about the word training mean that, like we say, if you train at something, you sort of get better at it? Is it something you can take from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Torah or being consistently faithful. And
hold that thought because the third answer I'm going to give you is going to be to that, to remind me of that when I get there.
Going back to the last sentence, God said to Moses, you can see what now I will do to Pharaoh. Now, interesting, because in this it says, Rashi said that now you will see the defeat of Pharaoh, but you will not see the defeat of the 7 nations when I bring the Jewish people into the land of Israel.
Oh, he's got it here.
Yeah, we're going to get that in a moment. Yeah. So let's get into the second answer. So we spoke about a first answer from the Gemara Sanhedrin, right? That's the Gemara Sanhedrin 101b. Now that because you have questioned my justice, you will only see what I will do to Pharaoh, that because of my strong hand, he will send them forth. And indeed, he will be so anxious to send them forth that he will forcibly drive them out of this land, even before they're properly prepared for their journey and are ready to go. That's why we had matzah, which didn't properly rise on our backs, right? But I will not allow you, Moses, to see Israel's victory over the kings of Canaan. You should have learned from Abraham, even though I promised him that he would be a father of nation, that he would father a nation through Isaac. When I told him to slaughter Isaac, did he come in with a protest? Nope. He was like, God, what's the deal here? He didn't ask. He did not question me, even though my command seemed to contravene my promise. Same thing happened with Isaac, and the same thing happened with Jacob. Right? They each were tested directly with their promises, and they didn't challenge. So the second answer I want to give you over here is that God is answering the question by saying that the answer lies in the future. So the first answer was that the answer lies in the past, right? In other words, the kids that are getting killed are the bad ones, right? But this second answer seems to be saying that the answer lies in the future, where it's going to be good in the end, right? So this is sort of, reminds me of the story of when Rabbi Israel Meir Lau, the chief rabbi of Israel, former, came to the Rebbe and he was talking to the Rebbe about the Yom Kippur War afterwards, which was devastating to the population of Israel. And the Rebbe was just asking him what it was like, what's the mood like in Israel. And he said, it's horrible. People are saying, what will be? I don't know. So the Rebbe said a Jew should never say, what will be, which is a passive stance, but rather, ma na'aseh, what will we do, which is an active stance. Asking why, lama, is a passive. Why? But asking lema, not lama, why, but lema, same word, just different vowels. Lema means for what purpose? Lema, for what purpose? What's the action that this leads to? What action do we need to take? And this really speaks to the heart of struggle, to the heart of crisis that we endure. I actually wrote a whole essay about this on Friday in my email about why it is that we need to struggle. And the answer, which we've learned actually in VAEI'RA, is that the struggle actually brings out the best in you. The struggle itself, the crisis, is what leads you to a far more powerful light than you had before, to a far greater level than you were before. For example, if not that the Jews went down to Egypt, they would never have experienced the revelation of the Torah at Mount Sinai. If you look through Jewish history, any time that there was a crisis, it was followed by some great experience after. After the destruction of our holy temple, we experience the expansion of the written Torah, the Talmud. After the Spanish expulsion, we experience the proliferation of the Kabbalah, the rise of the Arizal, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe, right? After the Holocaust, look at the gifts that we've received. We've received Israel. So after a crisis, after a darkness, comes a greater light. And if you look at it in the next verse, what's interesting is that the portion ends here. Because now if you go into the opening verse of this week's portion, now look what it says. It's amazing. What is Hashem actually answering him? He says on page 350, I'm doing the Hebrew. Vaydaber Elokim el Moshe. And Elokim speaks to Moshe. Who's Elokim? Midat Hadin. Elokim, remember, we've learned this before. Elokim is gematria, nature, hateva. The word Elokim is Hashem's name whenever he's hiding himself. Whenever he's disguised. Now, when the Jews are suffering, God is clearly disguised. God is clearly hidden. So Elokim speaks to Moses and he says, listen, Moses, I know you're having a hard time. I know you don't see the teacher. I understand that you're groping in the darkness. Vayomer elav, and he says to him, Ani Havaya. And he tells him, I am the infinite God. This opening verse carries within it extraordinary depth, where he says to him, if not for the suffering, you would never have been able to reach the revelation of Havaya, which is God's infinite power. And again, this is the thing, just to remind you of things that we've learned. For example, Abraham. So how does Abraham experience a miracle? Abraham is thrown into the fire of Nimrod. Right, Nimrod was the one that was the great pagan king of his times, and he said everybody has to bow down to me. Right, so Abraham refused. Anybody refused would be thrown into the fire. So Abraham gets thrown into the fire, and that's terrifying. How would you feel if you were thrown into the fire for your religious convictions? Quite terrifying, right? Abraham stays strong. Does he experience a shred of fear? The answer is no, not a shred of fear. And what happens now is he's filled with faith. He says, God, I know what your plan is, but I'm not afraid because I know I'm in your hands only. And what happens now is, as a result of his fearlessness, as a result of his enduring this crisis of being thrown into the fire, he now experiences a miracle, the shattering of the laws of nature. He walks through the fire unscathed, right? So he has a revelation of Havaya as a result of the darkness, the crisis, the struggle that scared the living daylight, that should have scared the living daylights out of him. A second example is Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who was a Talmudic sage, whose daughter was crying on a Friday night. And he asked her, why are you crying? She says, because I made a terrible mistake. I let the Shabbos candles you light to have shalom bayit, peace in the home. There should be light in the house. You shouldn't stub your toe and walk into the furniture. So she says, I realized I lit the candles with vinegar instead of with oil by mistake. Her father, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, says to her, no. Was he afraid? Was he stressed out? Did he get angry? No. He says, the same God that tells oil to light can tell vinegar to light. And the Talmud says the candle's lit all the way through to Motzei Shabbos. Why? Because once again, unfazed by financial distress, because he was a terrible poor. He was a pauper. He was poor as a shul mouse. And what he did was that by exhibiting zero anxiety to his financial distress, to what should have been financial distress, he then unleashed Havaya, which manifests in the candles burning until Saturday night. One final example is Elijah. This is from the prophets. Elijah on Har Carmel near Haifa, when there was the great debate, the contest between the prophets of the Baal idolatry and the Jewish prophets of the Baal idolatry, and Elijah, who was the one remaining loyal prophet, because the King Achav and Queen Isabel, the Jewish king and his Phoenician Lebanese princess wife, killed off all the other Jewish prophets. So Elijah has this contest, right, with two bulls on each on an altar, and the deal was whoever gets a lightning strike from heaven is proven to be the true God. So what does Eliyahu do? He has a crisis not of finance like Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, not a crisis of mortality like Abraham, but a crisis of faith. He's like, God, if you're real, then why would you let your prophets be killed like this? Why would you empower the hands of such sinful idolaters, right? He should have experienced a crisis of faith, where he says, God, maybe you're not as powerful as, they say. But instead, Elijah's unfazed. He remains strong. And because he remains strong, he taps into a power of Havaya, which unleashes the miracle that the fire comes down and scorches the earth, burns the water as well, right? So this is the essence of Yodaita, which is, and it's also similar to what we learned in the previous Maimon about Hanukkah, that the Greeks, the anti-Semites, their goal was to bring out the Yechida, the true essence of the Jew. That it's only by going through crisis that you're able to face that T-junction, where you have to make one choice or the other. Either fear, which is the knee-jerk reaction, or faith, which is the higher consciousness approach. When you have a crisis, the doctor calls you and says, you got 3 weeks to live, God forbid. I mean, right? How do you react? How do you react to that? There's an amazing story, which I might have shown you recently. I don't remember if I did. I think I did. Just to remind you, a woman who's the grandmother of one of my friends from Crown Heights, his name is Langzam. She came to the Rebbe to tell him that the doctors told her that she has 3 weeks to live. And she should play Hanukkah with her kids and it's all over. So she came to the Rebbe. She said, what should I do? The Rebbe said to her, I don't recognize the fearless woman from Samarkand, right? The fearless woman who was printing fake passports in the Russia, right, to save Jewish lives, right? What happened to you? You used to be fearless then. Now a doctor said something and you all bent out of shape. Muster the courage, laugh fear in the eye. So she said, what should I do? The Rebbe said, go home, enjoy your kids without a shred of anxiety. She went home. They didn't hear from this cancer ever again. She lived another 40 years. She passed away in 1991 and 92. Right? The story was in 1951. That's an amazing story.
That's like what the rabbi said to me. The doctor can't tell you you're going to die. It's not a doctor's something.
V'rapo yerape, and heal he shall heal. Permission has been granted to the doctor to heal, but not to kill. The doctor doesn't have that right. But if we come with the approach of Pharaoh, which I spoke about in Shabbos, the approach of Pharaoh, which is the doctor said, no, so it must be right. The doctor knows, he's a scientist, so it has to be this way. If you believe in science, you're 100% correct. Then you're going to die. But if you say, I don't believe in science, why? Because Hashem overrides science. Exactly. If I believe not in Elohim, if you believe in Elohim, you're going to die. If you believe in Avaya, you won't die, right? It depends. If you exhibit fear, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you exhibit faith, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, but a different way. That's the answer that Hashem is saying to Moshe. He's saying, look, why am I being wicked to this people? Why am I being nasty? Why are they suffering so much? Because the light that lies at the end of this tunnel is going to be so incredibly awesome, you've never seen anything like it. The miracles you're about to experience, the infinity you're about to be lifted up to, it's all worth it. And now I want you to think about this for a moment. If after 210 years of exile in Egypt, we experienced the revelation of Mount Sinai, right? Because we held strong onto our faith, at least the 20% did, right? And even that was a little shaky, rough around the edges. Then what do you think, what kind of light do you think lies at the end of 2,000 years of exile? Think about that for a moment. What kind of light lies at the end of this galus, this exile we haven't recovered from the Roman conquest in 69 CE? What do you think is going to happen at the end of this exile with the coming of Mashiach at any moment? We're going to have a light that's going to put the revelation at Sinai, that's going to make that look like kindergarten compared to what's going to happen now with the coming of Mashiach, because the darkness now has been so much more intense with the Holocaust and the Cossacks and the First World War and every inch of Europe which is stained with Jewish blood, right? And the suffering and the persecution that it's just untold. The Holocaust by bullets, the Holocaust by gas. I mean, we've experienced every kind of death imaginable, right? Think about how much we've suffered, and the light and we're still around this table. We're still here today. We might just be a small percentage, but guess what? Like the Maccabees, a small percentage, but we're still here. We're showing up still 2,000 years later. It means that we're carrying the faith with, it hurts like hell, but we're still here. We're like Moses. We say, no, well, how can you do this? And Hashem says, because the light that lies here, Havaya, you're about to experience just the reinvention of who you are in the most infinite way. Yeah, what?
I just want to say that you talked about fear versus fearless. So even if you're fearless and there is death, it doesn't mean it's a bad outcome. We talk about the woman being fearless and living, and I think I brought it up to you last time, and I think you kind of dismissed it. But
Yeah.
my thing is that learning from what you're saying today, death in the big picture is not necessarily a bad outcome. So even if you choose to be fearless and take the road of faith, and a person does pass away, there's a higher reason for it, and
But
we can't say, well, a person lives, therefore it's a good outcome. It is to us.
But Gil, I'm gonna dismiss it again. I'll tell you why. I can't accept that. Ideologically, I can't accept that because you're connecting with the level of faith, and I use the word faith as my own fault because it rhymes with fear. But you're talking about faith, emunah. I'm talking about an entirely different kettle of fish. I'm talking about a new concept, a different concept, a separate mitzvah in the Torah of the 613 mitzvahs. It's the mitzvah of bitachon, of trust. Faith means that I know that whatever will be, Hashem knows what He's doing. But trust means tov hanireh v'hanigleh. Let me explain. Tov hanireh v'hanigleh. Revealed goodness, obvious goodness. Trust means that it will actually be good. Not that I'll find out in 50 years' time or in heaven I'll find out why He needed to die. That's not revealed goodness. That's hidden good. Trust means that it will be revealed good. Do you understand what that means?
No, but how can one cannot accept the fact that there is trust? And I'm going with what you're going. Fearless and trust. Those are the two words I took from last time you brought this issue up. And I take them both and I say, if the ultimate outcome, that you have full trust in Hashem, but the ultimate outcome is a passing of a person, why does it necessarily have to be bad?
Look, I would agree with you. At the end of someone's lifespan. Bad. Look, it's an interesting point that you raised because at some point people do die. I mean, we don't know people live forever. It hasn't really happened in the history of the world, right? So at some point, with as much trust as you could possibly have, imagine somebody, the person of the greatest trust. I mean, like imagine like the Rebbe, like what? So bad things that he passed, right?
If you are truly fearless and truly trusting.
Yeah.
And the outcome is not exactly what you as a human flesh and blood, inferior to Hashem, pass away. Who said it's a bad thing? Because you can still be fearless and
that
trust.
Takes a lot of faith to be able to understand that.
Not just the faith, it's just actual trust. You see, I'm trying to incorporate this into my own life, and I say I'm giving myself and I'm trusting.
But just bear in mind that you are missing a segment.
Be good no matter
what. Just remember, you are missing a segment of the gates of trust, as Fran points out online here. That the gates of trust is a very, very fundamental building block of our spirituality. And we've learned it here as a community.
Right.
And I often reference it, and already today I've referenced it a few times. Just bear in mind that there's a whole thing of trust that you need to learn. It's more than just the word. It's a concept that needs to be developed.
And you're saying that if you truly reach trust, the way you're saying, and I will catch up on this, then the outcome is ultimately as the person would have wished for. So if a person is very, very
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We saw this happen in our own lifetime. What were the odds that 2 million Soviet Jews could get out of Russia, which was the second largest superpower in the world, who had subjugated the Jews and prohibited them from practicing, et cetera, et cetera. And Hashem came along and empowered the United States and Ronald Reagan and George Shultz and millions of Jews throughout the world to put the pressure on the Soviet Union, and 2 million of them left.
Right.
It's a miracle.
Yeah. And we see that. So why are people not flocking to shul?
Because they don't realize it.
Because they're unconscious. They're unconscious. They just don't realize.
They're not right.
They're just not conscious. They're not aware. They're in spiritually comatose.
And you had a nucleus of Jews in the Soviet Union who became religious, who learned Hebrew, notwithstanding the KGB, and went to shul or attempted to go to shul, who taught, et cetera, et cetera.
So I just want to share with you a closing thought here, guys, okay? Because, have to stay strong. The trucker, he says, you gave the analogy before that the farther back you pull the bow, the further the arrow soars, right? In other words, going away from your goal, doing something bad, seeming bad, is actually part of the progression towards the good. right? Pullback is actually part of forward. So even though we think of something as negative, it's actually a positive thing. And I just want to read you a little meditation that I came across here. Here it is. No, it's over here. Sorry. Here it is. The world was not created for some apocalyptic finale. Its magnificence was not formed to dissipate into ionized gas. Each thing was formed for the glory of its maker, who stands forever. Only the darkness must wind itself to its end, and it must be robbed of the treasures it holds. For the most precious things of this world are held in darkness. This is why we must struggle with darkness now and not run from it. All the torment it gives us, all our toil to overcome it, to tame it, and to dig out the diamonds it conceals, all is with meaning and purpose. For each obstacle that meets us on our uphill battle, each was made for the glory of its maker. So there are diamonds in the rough. And the reason why you experience the rough is so that you can extract the diamonds. That's Vayomer Elav Ani Havaya. Right now, you're an amateur, he says to Moses. You're an Elohim kind of people. But I want to make you Am Skula V'Goy Kadosh, a precious people and a holy nation, a kingdom of priests. How's that going to happen? Only if you be able to reinvent yourselves, if you can figure out the diamond that's buried in the rough. You gotta bring it out of the marble. It's trapped. You're gonna have to dig in the schmutz to get it out. So, in other words, the reason why we grapple with darkness, with harsh realities, with difficult times, the reason why we have difficult times is so that when we hold on strong with our trust, fearless, we then are equanimous, right? When we are unfazed, and we just hold on strong in our trust in God and say, God, I'm holding on for dear life. I know this is going to be good, revealed good. What we're doing is that we're pulling out the diamond from their rough, and you're going to emerge with a nugget of Havaya, of infinity. And then once you've done, you saw the rocket that went up yesterday, the NASA rocket that it was yesterday, 5:55 p.m. last night. So we saw that we were watching the rocket with the kids. It went up just here, southwestern angle. Went up, and it was beautiful. You see this rocket from NASA going up, and you see the fire engines, the huge boosters, and then you watch it divests of two tanks, just drops them, and it keeps on going all the way, right? Beautiful. So in much the same way, the negativity, the difficult times, they carry within them precious fuel. You need the fuel. So once you've used the fuel that you need, then you can just let go of the shell that you don't need anymore, the clipper. Then you can let go of the darkness of the evil, right? Once the anti-Semite has brought you to the depth that you needed to extract it in yourself, now they go away. They're done. We just chuck them out. We don't need them. The hate goes. That's a very powerful meditation at the very opening of today's Torah portion. All right, we'll leave it at that, guys. Okay. Shkaya.
The only space lunch I had seen, I was working in my office in Jacksonville, Florida,